can you tell us, in relation to the first game, where does Life is Strange 2 pick up? Does it continue? Can you explain how it's related to that?
So Life is Strange 2 takes place in the same universe, same setting as the first Life is Strange. It takes place 3 years later. Okay. But it's a new story with new characters. You've played episode 1, so Life is Strange 2 tells the story of Sean and Daniel Diaz, who are two Mexican Americans, aged respectively 16 and 9 years old. They live in the suburbs of Seattle with their father Esteban, and after a police incident, Esteban is tragically shot, and that's when the game reveals that the younger brother, Daniel, he has those superpowers that appears of telekinesis, and that frame that everybody will think that the cop who is getting killed is the fault of Sean. So at this moment, Sean doesn't know really what to do, and just is saying that he grabs his brother and he runs away, knowing that they won't get a fair trial and that they have to flee from the police. So that's when their big journey begins, where Sean thinks that to be free, to not be separated from his brother, to not have to deal with social services or anything, he has to leave the country. So they're thinking of reaching Mexico, where their father is from, and where their father still have a piece of land with a small abandoned house there. So they're having this idea of this big quest to escape, flee from the police and reach Mexico. So that's the start of the story, and the story takes the form of a road movie structure, where they will be meeting characters facing different tough situations and a lot of, the word in English, cliffhangers of, in French I would say rebondissement, but I don't know how to say it in English. Like, yeah, a lot of things will happen to them while they're trying to reach their destination. So without spoiling the other episode, of course, I can't tell you exactly what happens. Right. But the idea is this quest where Sean now has to be the father figure for Daniel. He's still a teenager, he's 16, so he has this new burden of teaching and taking care of Daniel, while he's also still a teenager that he had everything stolen from him, his life, his family, his friends. He's home, and he's on the road with his brother, so he's torn up, and as a player you'll be torn up between doing the right thing for Daniel, but also maybe trying to still have a teenager life when you can maybe have some new relationship, meet some friends on the road, and you have to decide the balance on how you use it for yourself or how you take care of your brother.
In terms of mechanics or even features, are we going to see anything new with Life is Strange 2 as compared to the first episode?
You mean of the first season?
Yeah.
Okay. So we tried, it's the same formula. It's a Life is Strange game, so it's still in its core a quite simple, I would say, adventure game with dialogue choices, interaction, almost like point and click elements where you interact with the environment, have some sort of inventory with some objects, some slight puzzles that you can solve. But in the second game we tried to push the interactivity with the storytelling a bit more, so we have this new, we call that dynamic dialogue system, where since you have Daniel, which is with you most of the time, we have a lot of dialogues that takes place between the two brothers, and we didn't want all the dialogue to be staged and static, so you have a lot of dialogues that are happening when you're walking, a bit like the conversations in a game like The Last of Us, for example, but the difference is that you can also decide to answer while you're still interacting with the rest of the game. Okay. So we have those. It's a bit also if you played Firewatch, something that happened when the walkie-talkie, where you're just walking the game and you can answer or not with the walkie-talkie to the one who is talking to you. We also have a new power, which this time is not directly, it's not the player character who has the power. In the first Life is Strange, Max has the power to rewind time. Right. In Life is Strange 2, Daniel has the power of telekinesis. And since you're not playing Daniel, you're playing Sean, you have the opportunity in a lot of moments to ask him to interact with his power, with some objects, some characters, to get you out of some situations. But based on your relationship with Daniel, based on your choices, he might not always agree to what you ask.
I was going to ask if your decisions affect that relationship.
Yeah, that's that's the core of the narrative game design of this game, is that in the first Life is Strange, the choices were you had some big choices and you directly saw the consequence and you could rewind to see the other consequence if you do another choice. We still have those major choices that you cannot rewind that will affect somehow Sean as a character, but sometimes also Daniel since he's with you and he sees what decision you take. But we also have a lot of smaller choices, like in dialogue or just stealing something or the way you talk to a character. And if Daniel is with you, he will listen to what you say, will look at what you do, and we have this kind of hidden meter that we use to take into action, to take into all those choices you make that will shape Daniel. Like if he sees you stealing too much, he might steal by himself later in the game. If he sees you or listen to you being mean to other people, he might think that it's okay to talk bad to other characters. And in the beginning of the game, those are smaller interactions like that, that will pile up to the final episode. So we just released episode 4, episode 5 will be released in early December, and that's mostly in episode 5 that you will see also the bigger consequences of how you shaped up Daniel.
Okay. Now, it's been a while since I played the first one. So you mentioned earlier that they're trying to get down to Maine. So are we venturing outside of Seattle with this game, or I don't remember if we were confined to Seattle the first one. It's been.
So yeah, the game starts in Seattle. Like the first hour of the first episode is really this kind of normal life that Sean is living in Seattle with his brother. That they have this relationship that older brother, young brother, like he's the little brat that is in your way when you want to do stuff.
Right.
You have your friends, you have this, that there is a party that will be at the end of the day, so you're trying to prepare for this party. There is this girl that you would like maybe to try to date during the party. We have the first part of the game, which is really like putting you in the shoes of this teenager having this normal life, and after the first hour or so of the first episode, we break that with the incident of the death of your father that just steal away from Sean and from the player all this small cocoon of a normal life, and therefore to be on the road, to live as outcast, to be on the run. So that's a real breakup in terms of mood and everything. And then we start the journey. So in the first episode, we stay in Washington and a bit of Oregon, and without spoiling too much, definitely we are visiting a lot of states during the 5 episodes, trying to go south and to reach the border.
So is 5 going to be our total, or is there going to be?
It's 5 episodes total, with the addition of the bonus episode, The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, that we released first, and which takes place between episode 1 and 2, or slightly just before episode 2.
You worked on both games, right? Okay. What's your favorite thing about living in this world, working in this world?
That's a very good question. I mean, as a creator, I think what I like the most working on Life is Strange 1 and Life is Strange 2 is how that's something we wanted to do, but also something that Square Enix allowed us to do is that in those games we are talking about a lot of social themes, social issues that we think are important. I mean, it is, of course, entertainment at its core, but for us, those stories are a good way to put the player with the interactivity in situations that sometimes he might not have experienced himself or not have thought about. And we had the chance, like in the first game, to talk about subjects like the violence in the school system. We talked about euthanasia, teen pregnancy, some aspects of difficulties of day-to-day life that teenagers are experiencing in the United States and everywhere in the world. And in the second game, something that we really wanted to push is this idea that Sean and Daniel are now living as outcasts. They are homeless on the run. So it's already a story about a sort of characters that we don't talk much about. And they are meeting a lot of outcasts also, people that are living on the verge of society, on the side of society. For example, in episode 3, we will be meeting some people that are called, or we call trimigrants, just people who decided to not be a part of society as we know it, and just decide to be on the road all the time, and sometimes do some small jobs for getting some money before they could just go again on the road. And that's something I really like about this game, that we could put some light on those people that are often left on the side of the stories. And to do that, we did travel a lot in the United States and meet a lot of people, talk to them, and we thought that it was really, I mean, we did meet some really exciting and cool persons that had a lot of interest, reflection on life to share with us, and we thought that it would be interesting to put those kind of characters in the game and maybe also just showcase that to the players.
I think I'm all done. Do you guys have anything?
I was going to ask about when you travel. You mentioned obviously they go through the different states and such. And I'm curious how that, or did it change your design in any way? Because you have a look for the game when it was based in Seattle, but obviously California and the southern states don't look the same way as Seattle does. But yet you want to keep a certain tone and atmosphere to the game. How do you change that?
Yeah, you're right. It's the first game was all based in the Pacific Northwest, and the beginning of the second game still takes place in the Pacific Northwest. When we're going south, so it means different scenery, different vibe, different weather. We are also, the game takes place over almost 1 year, so there are also different seasons. First, it was really interesting because we are also using scenery sometimes as a way to enhance and put emphasis on the inner thoughts of the character. Like in episode 4 takes place in Nevada, and a lot of places that are big deserts. And this is one episode where our main character is at its lowest point, so we'll have to see when you play the game, but a lot of bad things happen to him. And we thought that putting him like walking on the road with the heavy sun in the desert of Nevada, it also brings more to the story. I mean, we always use environment as a way to also tell something. So it was a way when we were thinking about the big story arc, we were thinking of the places that would be in a way also to talk more about those. Another example is in episode 3, they are working in a pot farm with the trimigrants I talked about, and they are for a while in this safe space of a camp in the forest, and we have those huge sequoia trees that are almost protecting them. So this kind of use of the environment, of the scenery that we can use to add to the story and the characters.
I'm curious about your writing process. You have 5 episodes, and I know the 5th one's going to be released in December. Do you already have the storyline written out up until the episode, or are you still editing and writing?
So the way we are working with with Raoul and Jean-Luc, the other director and the writer, those the same people we worked with on the first Life is Strange, we really like to write the story first in the real beginning of the game. So like it was almost 3 years ago when we did write the big story, knowing what was the beginning, what was the big story points and the endings. And then we let it, of course, rest a bit. And when we start the production work on each episode, we have to face the reality of production, the cost and everything. So sometimes we reduce a bit the content, like maybe removing one environment because it might be not easy to add a new whole town at a point. So maybe say, okay, they won't stop in this town, but we are still keeping the main story is intact from the beginning. We are just adjusting it a bit when we're working on each episode to be able to produce the game and not make the wait time even longer than it is right now. But yeah, it's written from the beginning because it's really important to know where we're going.
Sure.
And then we can adjust it a bit. We're also reading a lot of the reviews, the fan on Reddit, on Twitter, on the social medias. And sometimes we can adjust also a bit based on what we're reading from the players. So it's just bits, part and there, maybe some dialogue changes, or seeing that players really like the characters, so we can maybe even if it's a road movie where you are leaving the characters behind, we can bring back somehow a character with a letter or maybe a phone call or something that we could do in the next episode, going back to a character that the community loved.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank